Hello, welcome to my video. On today's video I'll teach you how to master my favorite character in this game, Wurt. She's one of the few characters that you have to put time and effort to get everything that makes her powerful. She starts with nothing, and late game you have the Merms to farm bosses easily and the ability to counter all seasonal challenges with the power of fish, which makes this character super rewarding. You work hard to get to use her perks and they are very worth it, as you will see. On this video I'll teach you how to deal with her disadvantages early game and how to work towards everything she can provide and what are the benefits of doing so. Starting with the stats. Wurt's stats are 200 hunger, 150 sanity and 150 health. Those are pretty good stats, with her max hunger being above average, but it can be better. When there's a Merm king in the world, her stats go up to 250 hunger, 200 sanity and 250 health. Having higher stats while not needed, it is pretty nice to live with. With more hunger, you can keep your belly full for longer before unbundling more food. With higher health, you can take more hits from creatures before needing healing. And max sanity can be pretty nice on situations where the enemy has a massive insanity aura. Before Wurt got some quality of life updates, it was not worth feeding the king for stats because you pretty much had to feed him daily, which was a waste of time and food. But now the king digests food slower, and higher stats at low cost is pretty nice to have. The king's max hunger is 200. When his hunger is above 190, he tells you, "Have done well, now go." And his hunger drains by 25 a day, so you can fully feed him and only go back to it after 8 days. He'll start losing health and die soon after his belly is empty. But as long as there's another house by the tapestry, there will be another Merm sitting on it, waiting to be a new king. Wurt has one big disadvantage, which is being a vegetarian. I personally love this disadvantage. It is simple, but hunger is one of the core mechanics of this game, so being a vegetarian changes the character in a fundamental way, which is fun and challenging. This disadvantage comes with a pretty good balance inside, which is getting 33 extra hunger from pretty much everything she can eat. For example, a dragon pie would restore 75 hunger to a normal character. It restores almost 100 for Wurt's. I personally never struggle with Wurt's hunger meter, so my guess is that if you have average knowledge on how to play the game, you'll do just fine. But if you are a beginner, I highly recommend rushing the Lunar Island. There you can find stone fruit bushes. You can dig it with a shovel and plant it anywhere in your base. They bear fruits throughout the entire year, requiring minimal fertilization, and as long as you're not mining the stone fruits, you can basically accumulate food that don't spoil. Something else you can find in the Lunar Island is kelp. You can eat kelp without disadvantages, so it's pretty good for Wurt's. Kelp can be planted on water and you can use a boat to push all of it into one place for easy harvesting. Dried kelp is excellent for sanity if you don't mind making drying racks. It dries in 2 minutes and it lasts for 20 days. And by the way, the meat you get doesn't have to go to waste. You can turn it to eggs, and even though Wurt doesn't eat it, you can add them to vegetarian dishes and she'll pretend she doesn't know better. As long as the dish is labeled as vegetarian, like ratatouille, she'll eat it. Fistful of Jam is also a really reliable dish for hunger that can be made with 1 berry and 3 eggs in a crock pot. But the main disadvantage of being vegetarian doesn't come from hunger itself, but health. Crockpot dishes are the most efficient way to heal yourself, and not being able to eat pierogies can be a challenge. But there are pretty decent alternatives. Early game you have 2 options. If you're rushing the ruins, you can grab a shovel and pay a visit to the blue mushroom forest. About 20 blue mushrooms should suffice if you're not pretending to be Wigfrid and tanking everything. If you're planning on killing a boss in the surface on your first to second season, Trail Mix is a pretty strong healing dish. Trail Mix requires 1 cooked birchnut seed, 2 berries and a twig, and it restores 30 health. The ingredients are very easy to come by on autumn, but a few days before winter all of the birch nut trees will lose their leaves and no longer drop seeds. On that case, you can save some birch nut seeds in a fridge to make trail mix late winter. Another option for winter if you really need healing and trail mix is no longer available, as mentioned before, pay a visit to the blue mushroom forest. That biome is not going anywhere. But on winter, besides killing the seasonal bosses, there is not much to do, so it's an amazing time to start farming. Farming is the mid to late game solution for Wurts. With the new farming mechanics introduced in Reap What You Sow, you can obtain an absurd amount of vegetables very fast with very little efforts. If you don't know how to farm, I highly recommend Jazzy's easiest way to use farm plots video. It makes farming extremely simple and you can definitely get away with not babysitting plants or worrying about crop combos. My recommendations for Wurts are tomatoes and potatoes. They get seasonal bonus all year long except for summer, so it's quite easy to get a crop and a seed. Choose seeds if you make a small effort. And when cooked, they restore 20 health each. Combine that with bundling wraps, you can easily get enough healing to defeat all bosses. Late game, you probably have a chest full of these. Jelly beans are so easily farmed by Merms that it just starts to stack up in a chest, and soon enough you'll be feeding jelly beans to your critter or just leaving royal jelly behind. You might think this is the end of this section, but there's something else to talk about. I absolutely love the combination of Wurts and a beefalo, also known as Big Fuzzy. It probably sounds weird that I'm talking about beefalos in the food section of this guide, but having a domesticated beefalo for the most part removes a lot of the struggle behind healing food. Unless you're dealing with projectiles, the beefalo will be your meat shield for most of the game, even against bosses, and that's besides the other advantages of not needing weapons and having fast mobility. So I highly recommend taming an ordinary beefalo to avoid needing healing. To have an efficient early game, I learned how to rush the ruins on a beefalo. So if you want the ruins loot for bosses on winter and a tamed beefalo by day 30, check my video on how to rush the ruins on a beefalo. Let's finally talk about the most important part of the character, Merms. First of all, Wurts can create 3 specific Merm structures: normal Merm houses, guard Merm houses, and the tapestry. The tapestry has to be upgraded so a Merm can sit on it. Once that Merm is fed, he becomes a king. Having a king in the world is beneficial both to Wurts and the Merms. They all get a buff from it. As mentioned before, Wurt gets a buff on her stats and the Merms will get a health and a damage boost. So before using the Merms to fight a boss, you need to have a Merm King active. One of the questions that I get the most is, how many Merms do I need? My answer would be 20 Merm guards. That's it. You don't need more than that. On my words, I've built 20 of them and I use those 20 for everything. Farming bee queen, dragonfly, moose goose, antlion, chopping wood, and mining rocks. Out of 1,000 days, there was one time bee queen killed the Merms, and it was probably my fault for being too far from the fights. For dragonfly, I suggest making a box with walls and locking the Merms inside so they don't run to the lava pools, or individually wall all the pools. But getting tentacle spots can be tough to obtain, so here's my way to get it. I like to gather a few of the local Merms in the swamp area and use them to kill the tentacles, which has a chance of dropping a tentacle spots. And as the Merms die, you will be collecting their fish and handing them to the king. Handing those fish to the king also has a chance of giving you more tentacle spots, so this strategy is a win-win, being way more fun than fishing in a pond. So just remember to occasionally go to the swamp when you have the time and you'll get 20 spots in no time. You can also kill the tentapillars in the caves for some tentacle spots, since you'll probably have to find the atrium anyway. It's a 20% drop chance from a tentapillar, but they respawn every 6 minutes. And during summer, you can fish at the Oasis Lake and hand those fish to the king, since you'll need desert goggles anyway. You can also make the Merms in the swamp kill each other to collect the fish. And you can make normal Merms in an area and make them fight each other every few days for easy fish, but I don't advise on doing this before you reach the 20 Merm guards goal. You should be handling the fish to the king for spots instead of using them to craft the houses. But that's my opinion. It's worth mentioning the change to befriending Merms. Now you can feed one Merm to have up to 5 befriended at the same time, similarly to Weber and his spiders. This makes so you only need a minimum amount of food whenever you need some workers or fighters. The amount of time they follow you depends on how much food you give them, which is a maximum of 3 days. And is there a purpose to make normal Merm houses? Besides using them to kill each other for fish? Not really. Merm guards can do whatever normal Merms can, but they have a lot more health and more damage. And here's a neat addition: if you kill a fish, all the Merms will stop following you. It's a pretty nice way to dismiss them if you don't really want them around anymore. And if you have a Merm king in the surface, it's not gonna affect you in the caves. But if you have the resources, you can set up Merm houses and the king in the caves as well. I've been using them to clear the ruins and even used them once to help me kill toads too. So it's definitely worth it if you have the time and resources for it. Sunfish and ice bream are crazy good for Wurts. The sunfish that can only be caught in the ocean during summer acts as a heat source in Wurt's inventory. The ice bream that can only be caught in the ocean during winter acts as a cold source in Wurt's inventory. And Wurt's holding a fish in her inventory gets a small sanity boost. For a normal character, a fish would die in just 1 day in the player's inventory. For Wurt's, fish lasts 4 times longer in her inventory, not in the backpack by the way. So why are those 2 fish so good and so worth the trouble? This might be obvious at this point, but they work as thermal stones for Wurts. A thermal stone that lasts up to 4 days without the need of constantly stopping to recharge it. And if the fish is spoiling, you can place it on the tin fishing bin so it can get its health back over time. So basically you only need 2 sunfish and 2 ice breams to use them infinitely as thermal stones. But it doesn't stop there. The sunfish specifically has a crazy good interaction with another perk Wurt has. Wurt is immune to wetness effects. When wet, she won't have any of the usual downsides from it, so no sanity loss and no slippery tools. But since spring is just after winter, the temperature of the world is still low, especially at nights. So while immune to wetness effects, she's not immune to temperature drops from being wet, because that's technically a different mechanic. Here's the neat part: you can use the sunfish to counter that for true wetness protection. This is actually incredibly powerful with the Enlightened Crown. Without the need to worry about temperature and rain, you no longer require to have seasonal gear on you. You basically can ditch the umbrella entirely and use the Enlightened Crown for infinite light throughout the entire year. The small sanity gain from the fish in the inventory also helps getting the crown active again after a hound wave, for example. Maybe the ice bream is not that advantageous, but you must have the sunfish. Well, that pretty much summarizes all of the main perks of playing Wurts, but there's some other stuff to talk about. She gets 30% speed boost from walking on marsh dirt, so if you need speed boost for a boss fight, that's an easy way to obtain it. Partially mentioned before, but she has a strong grip, which means nothing can take out weapons and tools out of her hand, not even frogs or the honking from Moose Goose. Frogs are not aggressive towards Wurts unless she attacks them, so you can actually base near the ponds for hound protection and not worry about frog rains at all. You can drown in the ocean without dropping anything or getting lower stats. And Wurts can read Wicker Bottom's books to gain or lose sanity, depending on the book. It won't trigger any of the book's effects, by the way. And Wurts can craft a clever disguise so other players can befriend Merms and use them. Unlike Weber and Warthog that are literally hated by everyone and everything, most creatures in the contents are neutral towards Wurts, with the exception of Pigmen. And when she has meat on her inventory, she gets a sanity drain. And about the difficulty on getting gold. While she can trade sea fish with the Merm King for gold, it's a minimal amount if you consider the time you wasted getting those fish. But now we have fish farms, so you can passively collect fish if you remember to regularly collect them from the farm. You can use them to obtain other gifts like trinkets and tentacle spots, but it's still a painfully slow way to obtain gold. But there's another solution besides character swapping. Wonky. If you found the Monkey Island, you can kill the monkeys until you obtain 10 trinkets and turn yourself into Wonky. Wonky is technically a different character, so it can't trade trinkets with Peking. After you're done trading trinkets with Peking, you can give bananas to the Monkey Queen and reverse back to Wurt's. So finally, after so long, we have a proper way to obtain gold as Wurt's. And a side note about Merms. Normal Merms will not leave their houses during winter, and guard Merms will not leave their houses until there's a king active. But once they're out, they don't go back in. And that pretty much summarizes all aspects of playing as Wurt's. If you have a question, the better way to get an answer is join the Discord. Also, don't forget to subscribe and to follow me on Twitch. And as always, thank you for watching.